The smile in the coffin, I remember the smell of lilies. Too strong, too sweet, artificial, like the sympathy in the room. Everyone wore black, but not everyone was mourning. I stood there in front of my father's coffin, surrounded by people who barely looked me in the eyes. My stepmother clutched a designer clutch, dabbing at eyes that weren't even wet. My half-brother adjusted his gold watch for the 100th time. And there it was, that smile. My father wasn't just resting. He was smirking. I froze. My breath caught somewhere between shock and rage. What kind of man dies smiling like that, knowing he left behind a family torn apart? Hi, I'm Isabella, and this is the story of how my father's final secret ruined everything, and then gave me back more than I ever expected. He wasn't always a cruel man. In fact, when I was little, he was my hero. He would bring me mangoes from the backyard, cut them in a way only he could, and feed me slices while telling me bedtime stories from the time he worked in the Amazon. I believed every word. I believed him. But that changed when I turned 11. The same year my mother died. Cancer took her quietly, but grief took my father louder. He remarried in less than a year. To Letitia, a woman with the smile of a model and the heart of a merchant. She came with a son of her own, Matthew, 2 years older than me and already a master manipulator. I became the outsider in my own home. My photos slowly disappeared from the walls. My room was moved to the attic to make space. I was called dramatic, ungrateful, sensitive. By the time I turned 17, I knew the truth. I was no longer I was a burden, but I stayed. Because deep down, I hoped he'd see me again. The real me. Not the version Letitia painted, lazy, entitled, cold. I worked through college, got scholarships, came home on holidays hoping to feel something familiar. Instead, I was handed chores while Matthias got praise for existing. And my father, he watched silently. Sometimes I thought he looked guilty, but then he'd look away. So when he died suddenly last winter, heart attack in his sleep, I cried not just for the man he was, but for the father he never allowed himself to be again. At the funeral, I kept my distance. Letitia had taken over everything: flowers, casket, announcements. She even wore white pearls, as if this were some society gala. I stood at the edge of the room, unsure if I was mourning or just numb. That's when the lawyer approached me. "Miss Isabella, your father left a sealed envelope for you. Personal delivery only." It was beige, heavy, and written in his handwriting. The same loops and slants from when he used to leave notes in my lunchbox. "To Isabella, only open when you're alone." I pressed it to my chest like it could fill all the holes he left behind. I didn't open it right away. I waited until the house was empty again, or rather, until I was invisible again. I went up to the attic, sat on the floor where the ceiling slanted low, and broke the seal. Inside were two things: a letter, a bank statement. I read the letter. "First, my dearest Bala, if you're reading this, then I've already disappointed you in ways I can never fix. I know. I watched it happen. I let it happen. I was a coward. But I never stopped seeing you. I saw every quiet kindness, every birthday forgotten by the others, every hurt you swallowed. I saw the strength in you, the pride. You were your mother's daughter and my greatest failure. I tried to make it up in the only way I thought I could. There's an account. It's in your name. 2 million reals, it's yours. No one else knows. They never will unless you choose to tell them. Spend it on your dreams. Or on your revenge. Either way, make it count. I love you, even if I didn't deserve to." Dad, I didn't cry. I didn't scream. I just sat there, staring at the numbers on that bank statement. It was real. He really did leave me something. And then I realized that's why he smiled. That was the moment something shifted inside me. Not just because of the money, but because of the validation. I wasn't crazy. I wasn't forgotten. He knew what they had done to me. And he gave me a weapon. Not a knife, not a gun, but something sharper: truth and power. Letitia and Matthias assumed everything would go to them. They were already planning renovations, selling off land, throwing parties, and I played along. I moved out the next week, quietly rented a place under a new name, opened a company, one that would grow faster than they ever imagined. And with every step I took, I remembered his words: spend it on your dreams or on your revenge. Why not both? If you're still with me, make sure you subscribe. This story is only beginning. And trust me, what comes next will make you rethink everything you believe about family. Drop a comment if you've ever felt like the black sheep, because sometimes the outcast is just the only one awake. I didn't disappear. I became invisible. And there's a difference. See, when people think you're gone, they stop watching. And that's when you move freely. I didn't scream for justice. I didn't confront them, because people like Letitia and Matthias don't respond to decency. They only understand results. So I decided to give them what they wanted, the stage. While I built the spotlight, that would one day expose them. I started small. I bought back the land that used to be my grandfather's, the same one they sold off without telling me. I hired a team to renovate it, modern, elegant, sustainable. I named it Casa Bala, a nod to who I used to be, a warning of who I was becoming. Meanwhile, they mocked me. Isabela's too proud to fight, Letitia told people. She never had the stomach for business, Matthias laughed. They even started posting photos online, champagne in hand, boasting about their new legacy. Little did they know, the only legacy they were building was me. Gatilho mental da antecipação. They didn't know what I was capable of, and I wasn't going to show them until I had everything in place. I didn't use the money to live large. I used it to build influence quietly. I invested in small family businesses they had destroyed over the years, bought out their competitors, partnered with their enemies. I found every person they ever stepped on and gave them a seat at my table. One by one, the empire Letitia thought she controlled began to shift under her feet. But she didn't see it, because people like her are blind to storms that start as whispers. It was during this time that I met Eliza, a real estate lawyer with sharp eyes and sharper morals. She said, "I've heard about your stepmother. People talk. Especially the ones she left behind." She became my confidant. Not because I needed legal help, but because I needed someone to remind me that what I was doing wasn't madness, it was strategy. "You're not vengeful," Eliza said. "You're corrected the story, and they won't like how it ends." Meanwhile, Letitia started getting nervous. Investors pulled out, permits failed, employees resigned without warning. She blamed bad luck. She never imagined I was behind it, because in her eyes, I was still the attic girl, the quiet one, the outsider. Gatilho mental da identificação. If you've ever been underestimated by someone who thought they knew you, you already know the fire that starts in your chest. That fire, it became my fuel. But the real moment, the one that changed everything, came 6 months later. I received an invitation, hand-delivered at gala. Charity-themed black tie. Hosted by Leticia E. Matils. The theme, legacy and leadership. You can't make this up. I stared at the envelope. My fingers shook, but not from fear. From the sheer irony of it all. They didn't even realize they had invited me, the girl they erased, to the very stage where they would announce their next big project. IRSVPD? Yes, with pleasure. The night of the gala was stormy. Perfect. Really? Letitia wore emerald green, the color of envy. Matthias stood beside her, still pretending to be powerful, not realizing he was already bleeding influence. I arrived late, alone, dressed in black velvet with a pearl choker. My mother's people whispered. Some recognized me. Others stared. Letitia's eyes locked on mine. For a second, her smile faltered. Then she walked away fast, almost like she'd seen a ghost. She had. The event began. Matthias made a speech. Letitia followed. They spoke of vision, family, building the future. All lies. Then came the presentation. A massive screen unveiled their new project. A luxury eco-hotel on land they claimed as their own. Except it wasn't, because I had already bought the rights, filed the permits, secured the title, and I'd timed it perfectly. The moment they finished their speech, the screen flickered and a new video played. Footage of Casa Bala, interviews with the local families, the mayor congratulating the youngest and boldest entrepreneur of the year, my name in lights. Not Isabela the burden, but Isabela the builder. The room went silent. Letitia turned to the organizers. This wasn't part of the schedule, but the host only smiled. We thought it was important to highlight who's actually making a difference in this city. Matthias looked like someone had knocked the air out of his lungs. And then the host gestured toward me. Our final guest of honor, Miss Isabela Rocha. Applause. Not for them, for me. I walked up slowly, my heels clicking on the marble like a countdown. When I took the mic, I looked straight at Letitia. You once told me I had no place in this family, that I didn't understand legacy. I turned to the crowd. Well, tonight I'd like to thank you, because you were right. I didn't understand legacy, until I realized it's not something you inherit, it's something you build. Gasps, whispers, I smiled. Everything I own, I earned. Everything you lost, you gave away. I left the stage without another word. Let the silence bury them deeper than I ever could. Are you still watching? Good. Because now you know sometimes revenge doesn't scream. It whispers, it waits, it builds. And when it finally arrives, it walks in wearing your name, holding everything they said you'd never have. Don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe, especially if you've ever been underestimated. This story, it's far from over. The next morning, the headlines were everywhere. Heiress returns. Isabela Roca stuns at gala with quiet takeover. Forgotten daughter no more. A new legacy begins. Letitia didn't leave her house for a week. Mathis tried to go live on social media to clarify things, but no one was listening anymore. Because the story people thought they knew, the one where I was just the discarded daughter, had changed overnight. And I didn't need to explain myself. I let the silence do that for me. But something strange happened after the dust settled. I didn't feel victorious. Not completely, because revenge, even when it's justified, still costs something. I sat in the garden of Isabela one night, listening to the wind rustle through the mango trees. The same kind my father used. To climb the same kind he'd bring fruit from when I was 5. And I thought, would he be proud or would he be ashamed? Then I remembered his letter. Spend it on your dreams or your revenge. Maybe he knew, maybe he wanted both paths to merge. But part of me still ached because I wasn't the girl I used to be. And maybe I never would be again. Gatilho mental, that conexão emocional. Have you ever gotten exactly what you wanted, only to realize it didn't fix what was broken inside you? That's where I was. So I started to write. Not for them, not for the world, but for her, the girl in the attic, the one they tried to erase. I wrote letters to her. You were never too sensitive. You were never a burden. You were just born into a house that didn't know how to hold someone like you. Then something unexpected happened. People started writing to me. Strangers, women, daughters, some from Brazil, some from other countries, all telling their stories of being silenced, discarded, betrayed by the very people meant to protect them. And that's when I understood this wasn't just about me. This was about us. All of us who were told to shrink, to accept, to sit still while others took what was ours. We weren't broken. We were becoming. That's when I made the decision. That would change everything again. I created a foundation, Rises, to fund education, therapy, and legal support for girls and women who had been pushed to the margins of their own families. I didn't announce it at a gala. I didn't give interviews. I just started. And within months, stories started pouring in. One girl got a scholarship she never thought possible. Another woman left an abusive home and opened a bakery with our support. A third finally took her father to court, and each one was like rewriting a page of my own story. Meanwhile, Letitia tried to retaliate. She accused me of manipulation, of stealing what was rightfully hers. She tried to challenge the will, but the envelope, that sealed envelope, was ironclad. Her lawyers never stood a chance. Matthews tried to build something of his own, but without my father's name, and without Letitia's influence. He was just another arrogant man with a half-baked idea. And the world, it had already moved on. One day, I walked past our old house. The gate was rusted, the garden overgrown. The same house that once held all my fears now looked small, powerless, sad. Letitia was at the window. She saw me. We locked eyes. And for the first time, she didn't look angry. She looked empty. And I felt nothing. Not pity, not rage, just freedom. Gatilho mental da libertação. Because real victory isn't about what you destroy, it's about what no longer has the power to destroy you. I turned and walked away. And with every step, I felt the chains fall from my memory. There's one last thing I want to tell you. Something I never shared with anyone before. A month before he died, my father called me. Just once, I didn't answer. He left a voicemail. I don't know if you'll ever want to talk to me again, but I wanted you to know I see you. And I'm sorry for all of it. I never deleted it, but I also never played it again. Until now. And when I heard his voice again, it didn't make me cry, it made me whole. Because I finally understood what he was trying to do with that smile. He wasn't smiling out of pride. He was smiling because he finally gave me back my voice, and I used it. Still here? Then you understand something most people don't. The best revenge is becoming everything they said you couldn't be. If this story hit you somewhere, deep, comment below with just one word. Unbreakable. Let's show the world how many of us refuse to stay silent. And don't forget to subscribe because my next story is even darker and even more true. There's something strange that happens after the storm ends. People expect peace. They think once justice is served, once the villain is exposed, the pain disappears. But that's not how it works. Sometimes the quiet that follows is louder than the chaos that came before. Because now, there's space for all the emotions you never had time to feel. A few weeks after the gala, I went back to the house one last time. Not to stay, not to fight, to close the circle. I didn't go through the front door. I went through the side like I used to when I was a teenager, trying to avoid Letitia-esque questions. The lock was rusted. The hallway smelled like old perfume and forgotten dinners. Everything was the same, and nothing was. I walked up the stairs to my old attic room. The door creaked, and for a second, I expected to see the mattress on the floor, my books stacked in milk crates, the single bulb that flickered when it rained. But the room was empty, stripped bare, except for one thing, a small wooden box right in the center of the floor. I hesitated. Kneeling, I lifted the lid. Inside were pieces of me. My baby bracelet, a drawing I made for my father when I was 7, a mango tree with our names on it, and a folded napkin with my mother's handwriting. Never forget who you are, Bala, even when they try to rewrite you. I don't know who put that box there. Maybe it was my father. Maybe even Letitia in a rare moment of guilt. But it didn't matter because that box didn't hold memories. It held proof that I was always here. That no matter how far they tried to push me out, the house remembered. The house knew. And now, I didn't need it anymore. I left the box on the kitchen table unlocked. Let them find it. Let them feel what I once felt, the ache of being seen too late. And then I walked away. Not just from the house, but from needing to prove anything to anyone. Gatilho mental da libertação e pertencimento. Because when you finally know your worth, you stop asking others to validate it. Back at Isabela, things were different. Warmer, lighter, not because the past had disappeared, but because I was no longer chained to it. The mango trees I planted in the garden were growing fast, strong, wild, just like I had. Every week, we held community dinners under the stars. People brought food, laughter, stories, and sometimes silence. But even that felt safe, because it was shared. One night, a young girl approached me. She couldn't have been older than 12. She said, "Is it true that they called you crazy?" I nodded. She looked down. "They call me that too." At home, I knelt beside her, took her hand. "You know what that means?" I asked. She shook her head. "It means you feel more than most. And that scares people who feel nothing at all." She smiled. For the first time that night, that moment, that's when I knew this was the real ending. Not the stage. Not the revenge. The healing. Letitia left the city a few months later, quietly. No public statement. No fight. Rumor is she moved to a smaller town under a different name. But I don't chase ghosts anymore. Mathos, well, last I heard, he filed for bankruptcy. No one wanted to do business with a man who built his empire on shadows. You see, people always think karma is a myth, until it knocks on their door wearing the face of the one they betrayed. And my father, sometimes, I still dream of him. He's not always smiling. Sometimes he looks sad, like he knows he broke something that no amount of money could fix. But other times, he's sitting under the mango tree, whittling wood, looking up at me like he finally sees me. And in those dreams, I smile back. Not because I've forgiven everything, but because I've forgiven enough to keep living. And that's enough. If you're still here, then this story meant something to you. And I want you to carry one. Truth with you, always. You are not what they tried to turn you into. You are who you choose to become in the silence, in the attic, in the ashes. And when you rise, don't explain yourself. Let them choke on their expectations. Leave a comment if you've ever been counted out and came back louder, stronger, softer, all at once. And if you haven't already, subscribe, because I have more stories. Stories about the quiet ones, the invisible girls, the late bloomers, the ones who weren't supposed to win. We're just getting started. You know what no one talks about? The inheritance that isn't written in a will, not the money, not the land, not the companies or stocks. I'm talking about the invisible things we inherit. The silence, the guilt, the way we flinch when someone raises their voice, the fear that we're too much or not enough. That's what my father gave me, too. Long before the envelope. Long before the smile in the coffin, it took me years to see it, to call it what it was. Emotional abandonment. He didn't hit me. He didn't scream. He just vanished while staying in the same room. A man who once told bedtime stories became a stranger who watched Letitia dismantle my spirit brick by brick and said nothing. And silence. Silence teaches. It teaches you that your pain doesn't matter, that your voice is dangerous, that the safest thing you can do is disappear. But here's the plot twist. I didn't disappear. They just stopped seeing me because it was easier to pretend I wasn't there than to admit what they were doing. Gatilho mental da dor reprimida? Maybe that's you, too. Maybe you've been carrying the weight of what was never said, never apologized for, never corrected, and still you carry it. You show up, you build, you heal, even when no one claps for you. I once asked myself, why did he smile in the coffin? Maybe it was regret. Maybe it was pride. Or maybe it was relief. Relief that someone was finally going to end the cycle. He couldn't do it. So he handed me the match. And I lit the fire, not to burn it all down, but to create warmth for me, for others. The legacy I inherited isn't 2 million reels. It's truth. And truth is a heavy gift. Because once you hold it, you can never go back to pretending. I started speaking publicly at small events at first. Community centers, women's shelters, then podcasts, panels, conferences. Not as the millionaire daughter, but as the girl from the attic who stopped shrinking. And every time I told my story, I saw it in the audience, someone gasping softly, someone holding back tears, someone realizing she's telling my story. I received a letter once, handwritten, no return address. Inside, one sentence. Because of you, I told my father to leave the house today. He listened. It wasn't signed, but I didn't need a name because I knew her. I was her, and I cried for both of us. Then came the message I wasn't expecting. From Letitia. It was an email, cold, formal, but beneath it, something else. Isabela, I assume you've heard I've sold the house. I'm not writing to apologize. I won't pretend to be someone I'm not. But I'll say this. You surprised me. Not with the money, not even with the revenge. With your silence. With your dignity. You are your mother's daughter. That much is obvious, and that makes me uncomfortable. Good luck. Eli stared at the screen for a long time. Not because I needed her words, but because I never thought she was capable of any. I didn't respond. Some things are better left unanswered. Because silence can be a weapon, but it can also be a shield. And I was done using my energy to explain myself to people who had already made up their minds. You don't need to win the argument, you just need to win your peace. I still visit the mango trees. They're taller now, the roots deeper. Some say mango trees represent protection. Others say they symbolize the strength of generations. I like to think they symbolize me. One afternoon, I sat under the biggest one with a friend from the foundation. She asked, do you ever wish you could go back? I thought about it. Before the will, before the coffin, before Letitia, before the attic. And I said, no, not even for a second. Because every bruise they gave me turned into armor. Every silence became a stage. Every betrayal, a map. Because every bruise they gave me turned into armor. Every silence became a stage. Every betrayal, a map. They thought they were burying me, but they were just planting me. And now I'm blooming in every place. They said I didn't belong. Sometimes healing doesn't look like happiness. It looks like peace. It looks like sleeping without replaying the conversations you never had. It looks like walking into a room and not shrinking to fit inside it. It looks like choosing yourself over and over again. And that's what I do now. Not because I won, but because I remember. I remember who I was before they told me who to be. And I carry her with me, the attic girl. The mango tree girl. The one who learned to breathe again after years of suffocating. People sometimes ask, would you still be who you are if your father hadn't left you that money? And the answer is yes, but I would have built it slower, with more scars and more rage. But I would have built it anyway, because I was always meant to. The money didn't change me. It just gave me a head start. What truly changed me was the truth. Truth that my silence wasn't weakness, that my emotions weren't flaws. That being the one who remembers everything is a kind of power no one can take from you. And now, I speak to you, the one still watching. The one who maybe sees pieces of herself in this story. The one who was erased, or ignored, or told to get over it. Let me tell you something they never will. You are not too much. You are not too emotional. You are not overreacting. You are simply awake in a world that thrives on sleepwalkers. If this story touched something in you, I want you to do 3 things. Comment, I remember, if you've ever held pain that no one acknowledged. Subscribe, because I promise you, this is just one of many stories the world needs to hear. Share this with someone who needs to feel seen, because visibility isn't vanity, it's survival. The last time I visited my father's grave, I brought him mangoes. I sat there quietly, no speech, no tears, just presence. And before I left, I whispered, "You smiled because you knew I'd survive this." Then I walked away, not out of grief, but out of power. Because the girl who once had nothing now owns everything, even her story. There was a photograph I used to stare at when I was little. It sat in a cracked silver frame on my mother's old dresser. In it, she was laughing, head thrown back, arms around another woman. I never knew who the woman was. The frame disappeared not long after my mother died. Letitia replaced it with porcelain figurines and perfume bottles that weren't hers. But memory is stubborn, and I saw that photo again, not in a drawer, not in some secret folder. It was in a newspaper article from 1994, a scan that appeared in an archive. When I was researching partners for Rises, there they were, my mother and that same woman, standing in front of a school. The headline read, "Women Create Educational Project for At-Risk Girls in Recife." I zoomed in, there was no mistaking it. The woman beside my mother had the same intensity in her eyes I now recognized in my own. Her name was Clarice Fontes. I didn't know what pulled me. Maybe it was the way the world seemed to shrink around that photo, but 2 days later, I was on a plane to Recife, not for revenge, not for closure, for answers. Rises had already started making partnerships across Brazil, so I told the board I was scouting expansion locations. But the truth was simpler. I wanted to meet the woman who knew my mother before Letitia rewrote her story. Clarice lived in a quiet part of Olinda in a house filled with art and unfinished books. She opened the door barefoot, wearing a linen dress, and when I told her who I was, she stared for a long time, then said, "Your eyes are hers. But the fire, that's new." We sat on her patio under bougainvilleas in bloom. She poured coffee strong and bitter and didn't ask me why I had come. She knew. She was fierce, Clarice said, not in the loud way, in the way she loved, in the way she refused to be small. I wanted to cry, but I didn't. Instead, I asked, why did she stop? Why didn't she fight harder to keep that life? Clarice looked away. She tried, but grief is heavier when no one else is helping. Carry it, and your father, ... He loved her, yes. But he also feared how much space she took up just by being herself. There it was. The truth I never dared to name. My mother had to shrink to keep the man she loved. And when she died, he kept shrinking until Letitia filled the space. Clarice walked to a cabinet and returned with a folder. "I've kept everything," she said. Letters, notes, her grant proposals, even this. She handed me a letter dated 2 months before my mother passed. It read, "If anything happens to me, tell Isabela one thing. She is not made to be quiet. And neither are you. Raise her like a mango tree, wild, sweet, untamable." I pressed the paper to my heart. Clarice whispered, "You were never supposed to live in that attic, Querida. That was a prison built by people too scared to see you fly." I didn't say goodbye. I hugged her like I was hugging a lost version of my mother, and maybe I was back in Snow Hollow. I couldn't sleep. I kept hearing Clarice's voice. My mother's words, untamable. That word haunted me. Because even after all I had done, the gala, the foundation, the power shift, I was still playing chess by the rules of people who never wanted me at the table. Was I truly free, or had I just become a more elegant prisoner? That week, I received news. A major political donor wanted to fund Rises, but only if I toned down the rhetoric around emotional abuse. They wanted it cleaner, more marketable. For the first time, I didn't hesitate. I declined. Because the attic may have shaped me, but it would never define me again. A few days later, Eliza, my lawyer friend, showed up at my office. She closed the door, threw a manila folder on the table, and said, "You need to see this." Inside were photographs, documents, transaction records. Letitia had tried to open a private trust fund years ago, with money siphoned from accounts that should have gone to me after my mother's passing. And my father, he had signed one of the authorizations. I couldn't breathe. This wasn't just neglect. This was betrayal written in ink. What do you want to do? Elisa asked. I could sue. I could press charges. I could ruin what little reputation Letitia had left. But something inside me paused. Because justice isn't always about winning. Sometimes it's about choosing not to become them. I stood at the window, watching the city breathe beneath me. Nothing, I said. Elisa looked confused. Nothing. I want it documented, protected, exposed, if needed. But I won't drag this through courts. I won't waste another year in their storm. I turned back to her. I already won. Because I know who I am, and she still doesn't. Elisa nodded slowly. You're stronger than you think, Isabela. No, I wasn't stronger. I was finally whole. And that was more than power. That was peace. It was a Thursday afternoon when he showed up. Matthias, I hadn't seen him in over a year. My assistant said he looked unwell, gaunt, tired, expensive shoes, but a soul unraveling at the seams. He asked to speak with me, alone. I told her to let him in. He stepped into my office like a man walking into his own funeral. And maybe, in a way, he was Isabela, he said softly. I didn't offer him a seat. I let the silence do what it does best. Expose. I came to apologize. He said, eyes darting. I was stupid. I let her manipulate me. I thought we were building something. I didn't know stop. I interrupted because I knew what he was doing. Not apology, not remorse. Survival. Matthias had finally run out of people to impress. Now he needed someone to forgive him. He sat, anyway, elbows on knees, face in hands. I lost everything, he muttered. Investors, clients, even Anna left me. Anna, his daughter, the only innocent one in all of this. And suddenly, I saw something I wasn't expecting. Not a villain, not even a man. Just a boy who never grew out of being second best. Who fed off Letitia's schemes because it was the only way he felt important. You didn't lose everything, I said. You gave it away, piece by piece. For applause. He didn't argue. I'm not here to fix you, Mathos, I added, and I don't hate you. I just finally love myself more than I need to explain myself to you. He looked up, eyes red. I just want to know if you think I can change. I paused, because that's a heavy question. Not for what it asks, but for who it forces you to become. I think, I said slowly, you can try. But it's not up to me to believe in you. It's up to you to stop running from the man you've been. He stood quietly. And before he left, he asked, do you think she ever loved me? Letitia, I looked at him, not with rage, but with clarity. I think she loved the way you made her feel powerful. And that was enough for her, but never for you. He nodded, opened the door, and as he left, I didn't feel triumphant. I felt free, because closure isn't always dramatic. Sometimes it's just watching someone walk away and not chasing after them. That night, I dreamed of the attic again. But this time, it was different. I wasn't trapped. I was watching from the doorway. Inside, I saw the girl I used to be. Knees to her chest, eyes hollow, whispering stories into the dark. And then she looked up. She saw me. She smiled and vanished. I woke up in tears, not of sadness, of release. Because for the first time, I knew she didn't need saving anymore. She had grown into me. Weeks passed, Casa Bala flourished. Rice's opened a second center in Bahia. A documentary crew came to film our work. And I gave my first televised interview not as a victim, but as a woman who rewrote her ending. One question caught me off guard. If your father were alive today, what would you say to him? I thought of all the possible answers, but only one felt true. I'd say, thank you for giving me enough pain to become a map. And enough silence to fill with my own voice. The interviewer blinked, and I knew it had landed. Later that night, I walked through the mango grove under the moonlight. I ran my fingers along the bark of the oldest tree, the one planted the day I turned 10. My father had buried a coin under it for good luck. He said it would keep the roots strong. I bent down, dug a little, and there it was. Still there. Tarnished, forgotten, but real. I held it in my hand like an offering, not from him. From the past. And I whispered, I'm not angry anymore. Because I wasn't. Not in the way I used to be. The rage had been fire, but this peace. This was the ocean. It didn't burn. It healed. It started with a letter, not an email, not a DM. A real letter. Cream-colored paper, careful cursive, no return address. The envelope bore only one word, Bela. Inside was a single page. There is something of hers I've kept safe. It's time you see it. Call me to Huao das Laranjeiras, 380 on Saturday at 4 p.m. Ask for Mariana, no signature. Some people speak louder in absence than they ever did in presence. This felt like my mother. Saturday came like a secret. I wore simple clothes, jeans, a soft blouse, the necklace my mother left me, not power armor, not battle clothes, just me. Rua das Laranjeiras was quiet. The house was old, vines curling around its edges, and the smell of citrus in the air. I knocked once. The door opened slowly. Bala, a woman asked. She was older, maybe 70. Her voice was delicate, like paper left in the sun too long. But her eyes, fire. I'm Mariana, she said. I was your mother's first friend in Snow Polo. She led me inside without asking why I was there, as if it had already been decided. The house was full of sunlight and books and music playing softly from an old record player. She left this with me, Mariana said, holding out a box wrapped in silk. I hesitated, not out of fear, but reverence. Inside were tapes. Old cassette tapes, each one labeled in my mother's handwriting. For Bella Minos, AG5. For Bella. When you're 10 inches for Bala, if I'm gone, my throat tightened. You knew she'd die, I whispered. Mariana's eyes welled. She didn't know for sure, but she felt it. There were signs. And she wanted you to grow up with her voice. I took the box like it weighed the world. Because maybe it did. Back home, I stared at the tapes for hours. I didn't rush. Some stories deserve time. When I finally pressed play, her voice filled the room, soft, warm, alive. Hi, baby. If you're hearing this, I'm probably not there, but I'm still with you. In every mango tree, every story you tell, every time you laugh so hard you forget to breathe. They may try to make you small. Don't let them. You were not made to fit into silence. You were made to sing. I broke, the kind of crying that shakes you from the inside out. Not just grief, recognition, because I finally understood something I hadn't before. My mother hadn't just left me memories. She left me instructions. To fight, to grow, to remember who I was before the world told me who to be. That night, I wrote a new letter to the future, to a girl I hadn't met yet. I didn't know her name, but I knew her heart. She'd be watching this story someday, years from now, maybe on a cracked phone in a tiny room, wondering if she mattered. So I wrote, Dear girl who feels invisible, you are not broken. You are blooming in secret. And one day, they'll wish they had treated you like the storm you were becoming. Weeks passed. Rises published a memoir. Not mine, but a collection of letters from girls who had healed through our work. We called it The Girls Who Weren't Chosen. It sold out in 3 days. People didn't just read it. They saw themselves in it. I received thousands of messages from daughters, mothers, even sons, each one a thread in the tapestry of what this journey had become. And then, one night, at a panel event in Rio, a teenage girl came up to me with shaking hands. She said, I started writing again because of you. My father said girls who talk too much don't get loved, but now I write like it's oxygen. And I don't care if he chokes on it. I hugged her and whispered, that's how you win. But it wasn't just the broken who came. It was the guilty, too. A woman, maybe in her 50s, approached me after a lecture. She said, I was a Letitia once. I saw pain and stayed silent. I raised a daughter who fears her own joy, and I don't know how to undo it. I looked at her and said, you don't undo it. You own it, and you start again, one truth at a time. She cried in my arms, because sometimes the villains are just former victims who forgot to break the chain. I'm telling you all this because the story doesn't end at the will, or the smile in the coffin, or even the revenge. That was the spark. This is the fire, and it's still burning. Not to destroy, to light the way. The question haunted me for years. Why was he smiling? In the coffin, in that final moment, as if he knew something none of us did. I'd built theories, guessed at meanings, but nothing ever settled inside me. Until the day I found the envelope. Not the will, not the money. Another envelope, hidden behind a painting in his study. In the house Letitia had since sold, it was sent to my foundation, forwarded, misfiled, and finally delivered. Inside, a letter, in my father's handwriting, dated 1 week before he died. Bala, you've always been the part of me I never knew how to love properly. I watched you grow and couldn't understand you. You were loud where I was, quiet, brave where I was cautious. You reminded me of her so much that it hurt. Letitia was easy, predictable. I didn't choose her out of passion. I chose her out of fear. Because she didn't challenge me. Because she didn't remind me of my failures. I watched you suffer, and I stayed silent. That was my sin. I don't expect forgiveness. I only hope you inherit more than just the money. I hope you inherit the courage to live bigger than I did. The 2 million reals, it's not guilt. It's not reparation. It's seed. For whatever you choose to plant, and if you're reading this, I guess I can finally rest. Smile back if you can. Dad, I didn't cry. I closed the letter and placed it in the same wooden box I once found in the attic. He had given me his silence in life, and his voice in death. I don't know if that's justice, but it was enough. And maybe that's why he smiled. Because for once, he did something brave, even if it was too late to see it bloom. 1 month later, I stood in front of a classroom in Pernambuco, a group of girls, wide-eyed, brilliant, impossible, not to love. I told them about mango trees, about attics, about letters and envelopes, and women who speak too loudly. And when I finished, one of them, the smallest one, raised her hand. "Do you still feel pain?" she asked. I paused, not to think, to honor the honesty of the question. "Yes," I said, "but it doesn't own me anymore. Now it's just part of the story I get to tell." And the story keeps getting better. They clapped, but not politely, wildly, fiercely, like they've just seen a future they could reach. And maybe they had. That night, I visited my mother's grave for the first time in years. I brought mango blossoms and the tape labeled for Bala when you're ready. I sat beside the stone and pressed play. Her voice cracked with age on the tape, but it was still her. "If you made it here, my darling, then you did it. You survived, you loved, you lived, you grew. And now, give yourself permission to let go of everything you were never meant to carry." I closed my eyes, and I did. Letitia was seen last in Lisbon, running art galleries for people who liked their tragedies behind glass. We never spoke again. But one of her assistants sent me a photo once. She had a mango blossom in a vase on her desk. I smiled, because sometimes, even those who break you end up carrying pieces of your life. So here we are. You, me, a screen story. Maybe you watched this with headphones in the dark. Maybe you watched while folding laundry, or hiding in the bathroom, or after everyone else had stopped seeing you. However you found this, I'm glad you did. Because if there's one thing I know now, it's this. The girl in the attic was never weak. She was waiting to become, and now she writes her own endings. There's a word in Portuguese, it means to belong. But it also carries weight, because sometimes we grow up believing that belonging means fitting into places that were never built for us. That love is earned, that silence is safer, that softness is weakness. I believed all of that once. In the attic, in the shadows of Letitia's shoes, in the quiet rooms where my father's voice never rose in my defense, but not anymore, because I don't need to fit in. I belong to myself now. And that changes everything. People always ask me how it felt. The money, the victory, the headlines, but none of that comes close to the feeling of walking through my old neighborhood and hearing someone say, "There she is, the woman who came back." Not rich, not famous, whole. That's the real legacy. Not the will, not the mansion, not even the foundation. It's this, that I learned how to love the version of me they tried to erase. And now she loves me back. If you're still watching this, then this story meant something to you. And that means you belong here, not just in this channel, not just in this video, but in the world, exactly as you are. You don't need to rise from ashes. You don't need to wait for a will. You don't need a dramatic moment of revenge to prove your worth. You're already enough. Right now. Even in your confusion, even in your fear, even in your softness. Especially in your softness. So here's what I want you to do now. Leave a comment. Tell me what you've survived. Tell me what you're still carrying. Tell me about your attic, your Letitia, your silence, your seed. Because when you name it, it loses its power. When you speak it, you make space for someone else to breathe. And subscribe. Because this isn't the last story I'll tell. There are so many more about women who were never picked but built their own tables. About the kind of heartbreak you can't post online, about the quiet revolutions that start in bathrooms, courtrooms, kitchens, if you're part of that. If you've ever been underestimated, this is your place. And we're just getting started. As for me, I still visit the mango trees, sometimes alone, sometimes with girls from the foundation. We sit under the branches, we tell stories, we cry, we laugh so hard it echoes down the street. And no one tells us to quiet down anymore because that time is over. That version of the world is gone. We're not waiting for permission anymore. We are the ones writing the next will. We are the legacy. And when the world asks how we made it, we'll smile, just like he did. Only this time, it will be for us.